back into this, obviously, because we're talking about chapters, and that's obviously one of my questions. We have a chapter 7, chapter 13. I've heard of a chapter 11. And you mentioned right now that a chapter 7 is basically just you're liquidating everything. Uh,
Yes.
the chapter 13 is the reorganization.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that 13?
Sure. So without getting too technical, the main idea of a 13 is that instead of having a trustee coming in, like in a 7, who the trustee is appointed by the court, will come in, get all non-exempt assets, sell them off, and give whatever proceeds to the debtors, or to the creditors rather. In a 13, the debtor is choosing to actually go through the court, same trustee, they take whatever non-exempt assets they are, and they look at a payment plan. So a general payment plan. So you look at the income, you look at what you're bringing in, what are your necessary expenses. With those taken out, the trustee will actually then, the debtor presents a plan, and through that payment plan, if it's agreed to, then each creditor gets paid a portion of their debt, typically pennies on the dollar, a month, until when the plan finishes, it's over. And they're paid according to priorities and whether they have a lien or not. So it depends. But typically, what it is you set up a lump sum payment to settle all your debts that existed before filing of the petition, right? Okay. So that's really what it is.
And now, could you talk a little bit about the chapter 11 that I've heard of as well? Is that what type of a client is eligible for that?
So a chapter 11 is really a business bankruptcy, right? And what that is, it's business and individuals of certain higher net worth would be eligible to that. And what's good about it is it actually lets you appoint your own trustee. You can act as your own trustee under a chapter 11, but it's another reorganization, right? Under chapter 11, you have, many different companies have filed for chapter 11 bankruptcies, large companies. And actually, good thing you brought this up, there's actually a new chapter specifically geared towards small businesses. So it helps small businesses and has some more terms in there that are more favorable for the circumstances of small businesses to reorganize their debt, reorganize themselves to then move forward in a better way. So
awesome. Now, let me ask you a question. Sometimes I get people that come in. Obviously, we review their credit report, and then they throw out the thing. I might just go ahead and do a bankruptcy. How much? Because obviously, looking at other debts, how much debt is enough debt to say, you know what, this person should consider filing for bankruptcy?
It really depends. Honestly, they're not just income, but there are many different factors that go into whether to file for bankruptcy, right? How much debt depends on how much earning potential this person has, right? Or what income does this person have? And besides that, like a few $1,000s, probably not, generally. But when you're the typical debtor, particularly for a 7, what you see is debts of tens of thousands, or they run up a good amount on their credit cards. They have however many thousands of dollars in medical debt. It's typically not just like $2, $3, $4,000 that we're talking about. And besides that, you may or may not want to file for bankruptcy particularly if you filed for bankruptcy before, right? If you file for bankruptcy within 8 years and you get a discharge, particularly 7, then you have to keep that in mind if you want to refile. I mean, there's no limit on necessarily on how many times you can file for bankruptcy, but you get a discharge once every 8 years.
Wow.
So if you've already had a bankruptcy, we have to reevaluate your case to see what the best goal would be. So, for example, if you filed a 7, you got a discharge, you're in some more trouble now, you may still want to file, but keeping in mind that you would just get a restructuring, a reorganization. So maybe it might be more favorable to actually do debt negotiation or some other way. And additionally, when it comes to these financial circumstances, another thing that we see is people placing their money where it's away from what they need, right? So people are neglecting necessities, people are neglecting certain key things that they have to pay for. And sometimes those debts, even if it's like a few $1,000s or a good amount, maybe some of those debts can be repaid or can be or are no longer enforceable anyway, and they can be repaid if you just switch up how you're using your money. So sometimes that's the less expensive option. That's why it depends on the person. It depends on the client, the circumstances. That's why before we file a bankruptcy, we have to go through a pretty extensive questionnaire, which is sometimes like it's sometimes pretty jarring for people to share so much about their finances with someone, to share. Some people don't even know that they have debts that have accumulated. They pop out of nowhere. They don't know that they owe taxes on this, or some people genuinely do not know, and they're surprised by it. And it's kind of like an excoriating process to, oh, here's all my life in front of you, and it's because people think they know what they're doing with their money. 9 times out of 10, even top professionals that we see, they don't. They don't. So how, in general, how much debt is is enough for a bankruptcy? It depends. It depends on a number of things.